A customer came in a few weeks ago with one of those projects that you just dream about, man. An American icon. He's been sitting on this thing for 25 years. The car is here today. We're going to check out what we're working with.
When Counting Cars became one of the biggest car shows on the planet, Danny Koker also became one of the biggest car show hosts on the planet.
Your name is getting ready to be etched into automotive history. Love you guys. Thank you very much.
And why wouldn't he? He was the main man at Counting Cars. The show essentially didn't exist without him. The show Counting Cars was based around his repair shop called Kustoms. The show basically followed the activities of his crew as they went about restoring and modifying cars to flip them for a huge profit. For a while, a lot of people thought that Counting Cars was about to be cancelled by the History Channel, so they wondered what would happen with Danny Koker and his band of merry repairmen. However, that couldn't have been farther from the truth. The first is that the History Channel has not cancelled Counting Cars, and the show recently aired its 10th season. However, the 11th season is yet to air, and while it looks like there will be an 11th season, this is show business and a lot of things can happen in a very short while. In this video, we'll be looking at who Danny Koker is, the chances of the 11th season of Counting Cars airing, and what he's doing right now in between filming Counting Cars. Danny Koker is probably one of the most famous reality stars in the world. Millions of people watch Counting Cars every week, and it's really difficult to talk about car shows without mentioning Counting Cars. But his time with Counting Cars and even Kustoms is only a small slice of his life. After all, he only started Kustoms in his early 30s. Despite his rough persona, Danny Koker was born into a comfortable family of four. His father was a singer, songwriter, pianist, and conductor who belonged to several bands including the Weatherford Quartet, Foggy River Boys, and the Rex Humbert Family Singers. Interestingly, he was also born into a line of family members who'd worked with Ford over 50 years, so making and repairing cars was almost in his blood. However, Danny wasn't always destined to go into cars. As a young boy, he had an amazing voice and was even part of a band his father created which was named the Koker Family. The Koker Family as a band was moderately successful, and they even once performed in the Carnegie Hall in New York City, with Danny Koker taking center stage. Despite his love for music, Danny was always fascinated by cars. When he was 8 years old, he got a cruiser toy, and ever since then he'd been obsessed with cars. The fact that his father and several relatives worked at the Ford Motor Company made his love for cars blossom into a passion that he would take into his youth. Interestingly, most of what Danny knows about cars today was self-taught. That's right, since he always had people who repair cars around him, he just picked up what he could pick up and went to work teaching himself the rest. According to Danny, this part was quite easy for him. All he had to do to learn how a particular car worked was to, first of all, want to get his hands dirty. Once that feeling overcame him, he would be capable of taking the car apart, learning how all the parts worked, and putting them back together. Of course, it was certainly a lot harder than that. For example, not everyone can pull a car apart in the first place, but Danny made it sound so easy. That's probably because he was quite talented at building stuff and being handy. So how did Danny Koker go from a child that knew how to sing and pull a car apart to the Count from Kustoms? Well, it all started when Danny moved to Las Vegas and decided to establish a one-of-a-kind vintage car and chopper restoration and customization workshop. At first, the workshop wasn't a commercial venture and was merely Danny's garage, where he exclusively tinkered with his extensive private vintage hot rods and motorcycle collection, along with his friends' automobiles. However, as time went on, he acquired a reputation of being particularly skilled with choppers and vintage vehicles. This reputation drew a lot of car enthusiasts to his garage, and soon enough, he was forced to start taking on customization jobs. Once he started doing this, he knew that he had to name the shop and give it a brand. The name he eventually settled on was Kustoms. Now, why would Danny call his shop Kustoms? What inspired that name? It turned out that he'd earned the nickname The Count because he was once a part owner of a local TV station called KFBT. On that station, he'd hosted a TV series entitled Saturday Fright, and it was a weekly TV show that introduced B-movies. He'd done this show for a decade and had become quite popular for playing the character of an Elvis-obsessed vampire complete with a cape. Because of this, people around the area started calling him The Count, and it stuck. So, when he was finally setting up his repair shop, it made sense to call him Kustoms. So, how did Kustoms become Counting Cars? Well, during his years at Kustoms, Danny Koker had gotten a reputation of being the foremost expert on cars. This reputation got him a spot on the show Pawn Stars, where he was regularly called upon to give a valuation of older cars or parts. The success of Pawn Stars and the popularity of Danny on the show gave the History Channel the incentive to create a spin-off show made on cars. The show was called Counting Cars. After just 2 years of being on the show, Danny started participating not only as its main host, but also as a writer and an executive producer of the show. This gave him more control over the content shown to the public. This means that whatever you eventually see on Counting Cars has Danny Koker's express touch. One interesting thing that people fail to realize is that while he had a pretty great career as a mechanic, not everyone gets to be a celebrity mechanic, he's also not done badly for himself on the music front. Here's the thing. Danny didn't just pick up the spanner and abandon the mic. Despite spending most of his time on cars, his love for music was never really far away. So, one day after an impromptu jam session he had in a Vegas club, he formed a rock band called, you guessed it, Count 77. Okay, maybe you didn't guess that 77 after Count, but you should have guessed that the name would be Count. His band included lead guitarist Tony Curtis, guitarist Johnny Zito, bassist Barry Barnes, and drummer Paul DeCibio. After a while of jamming together, they found that not only were they great together musically, but they also shared a lot of values. So they decided that they would continue to perform in rock clubs as a group. Now, at the time, Danny didn't take the band seriously. It's not like they were searching for record deals or anything. After all the men of the Count 77 were middle-aged men who were simply having the time of their lives. You know, like middle-aged men often do. One day, Shrapnel Records got to know them through Tony Curtis, and in 2014, the brand got a record deal. You heard that right. Danny Koker isn't just a celebrity mechanic, he's also an actual musician. But that was not the end of Danny's journey with music. After getting signed with Shrapnel Records, the founder of the record label Mike Barney introduced them to Tommy Pears, who helped them do additional vocals and keyboard work. Tommy did a lot of work with the band and helped them complete their sound. After working with the band for a while and helping them improve their sound, he decided to join them since he also lived in Las Vegas. After refining their sound, the band decided to record an album. It didn't take long for the 13-track self-titled studio album to be completed after Danny gave them a recording studio to work in. They went on to release the album in August of that year. While the album was not a commercial success, it was successful enough for Shrapnel Records to greenlight another album by the group just 3 years later. This means that not only does Danny Koker lead a band, but he also has a record deal and has made 2 albums. We aren't quite sure if this reaches the polymath threshold, but it's certainly not every day you meet a celebrity mechanic who's also a decent recording artist with 2 full-length albums. Where does he even get the time? So, what's Danny Koker up to right now? Well, if he's not filming the 11th season of Counting Cars, he's probably on a local tour with his band. After he's not doing that, he's probably spending time with his wife Corey Koker, who he married in 2015. Despite being a relatively young couple, Corey has now become a huge part of Danny's life. For example, she's the one who helps manage Count's Vamped Rock Bar and Grill, which is a bar owned by Danny. Another interesting thing about the couple is that they've decided that they will never have children. If you were wondering about whether any little Dannys or little Corys exist, well, they don't, and probably never will. So, if you've been wondering what happened with Danny Koker, well, there's all the deets.